The streetlights buzzed, casting an eerie glow on the deserted road. A stray dog howled in the distance, its mournful cry echoing through the night. Emily clutched her purse tightly, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the stillness. She quickened her pace, her footsteps echoing in the empty street. She just wanted to get home, to the safety and warmth of her apartment.
Midnight, the witching hour, the time when the world feels most alive with unseen forces.
The air grew colder as she walked, each step echoing in the silence. The chill seemed to seep into her bones, making her shiver. Shadows stretched from the buildings, long and menacing, like dark fingers reaching out to grab her. Emily shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. She wished she'd taken a cab, but it was too late for regrets now.
I shouldn't have stayed late at the library. The thought echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of her mistake.
But the research paper loomed, a deadline fast approaching. She had needed the extra time, but now she was paying the price. Walking alone in the dead of night. The streets were deserted, and every sound seemed to be magnified. A sudden noise. She stopped, holding her breath. Her eyes darted around, searching for the source.
Just a cat. She let out a shaky breath, trying to calm her nerves.
She told herself, darting across the street. The sooner she got home, the better. Emily exhaled deeply, trying to slow her racing heart. She was almost home, just a few more blocks to go. She could do this. She had to. Walking again, she focused on the sidewalk ahead. Count the cracks, don't look back. Her apartment building was just a few blocks away. That's when she saw him. A figure, shrouded in darkness, stood at the far end of the street. He was tall and thin, almost skeletal. Emily couldn't make out any features, just a silhouette against the faint glow of the streetlight. He stood motionless, as if watching her.
Oh no.
Emily's breath hitched. A shiver ran down her spine. It was probably just someone waiting for a ride, she reasoned. Trying to convince herself, she quickened her pace. The figure didn't move. He remained under the streetlight, a dark sentinel in the night. Emily's heart hammered in her chest. She risked a glance back. He was closer now. Much closer. How was that possible? She hadn't heard any footsteps, no sound at all. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. She broke into a run, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The man, the shadow, whatever it was following her. Her apartment building came into view. Hope surged through her, a lifeline in the darkness.
Just a little further.
Reaching the entrance, she fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking. The door swung open. She darted inside, slamming it shut behind her. Leaning against the door, she gasped for breath.
Safe, I'm safe.
The lock clicked shut, a physical barrier against the darkness outside. Emily forced herself to calm down. It was just her imagination, the stress of the deadline, the late hour playing tricks on her mind. There was no shadow man. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, each step a little lighter than the last. Reaching her door, she breathed a sigh of relief.
Home.
Stepping inside, Emily switched on the light. Her apartment, usually a haven of peace, felt different tonight. Cold, oppressive. She closed the door, locking it securely. The click echoed in the silence.
Why do I feel like I'm not alone?
Emily shook her head, trying to dispel the unease that clung to her. It was just nerves. She needed a hot cup of tea and a good night's sleep. As she walked towards the kitchen, a floorboard creaked behind her. She whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat. Nothing, just shadows dancing in the corner of her eye. The hairs on the back of Emily's neck stood on end. It was an unsettling sensation, one that sent shivers down her spine and made her heart race. She had felt this way before, but never this intensely. A cold sweat broke out on her skin. She was being watched. She could feel it. The sensation was so strong, it was almost as if the air around her had thickened, pressing down on her with an invisible weight. Slowly, she turned towards the mirror hanging on the wall. Each step felt like an eternity, her feet heavy as if they were made of lead. The room seemed to grow darker, the shadows lengthening and closing in around her. Her reflection stared back, her eyes wide with terror. She could see the fear etched into every line of her face, her pupils dilated, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. And then she saw him, the figure that had haunted her dreams, now standing just behind her. Standing behind her, reflected in the mirror, was the Shadow Man. His presence was overwhelming, a dark, oppressive force that seemed to suck the light out of the room. His form was clearer now, gaunt and skeletal, as if he had been starved of life for centuries. His skin clung to his bones, giving him an almost mummified appearance, his eyes glowing with an eerie red light. They were like burning coals piercing through the darkness, filled with a malevolent intelligence that chilled her to the core. His mouth was stretched into a grotesque grin. It was a smile devoid of any warmth or humanity, a twisted expression that spoke of unspeakable horrors. A scream caught in Emily's throat. She wanted to cry out, to run, but her body refused to obey. She was paralyzed with fear, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. She spun around, but he was gone. The room was empty, the oppressive presence lifted, but the fear remained, vanished. S1. Media, woman looking around frantically, person in shock saying, "Oh my God, oh my God." She whispered, her voice trembling. Was it real or just a figment of her imagination? The question lingered unanswered as she stood there, alone and terrified. But the terror remained. A cold fist squeezing at her heart. She could feel the icy grip tightening with every passing second, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps.
He was here. The presence she had dreaded, the one that haunted her every waking moment.
Inside her apartment, the one place she thought she could be safe, now felt like a prison. There was nowhere left to run. The walls seemed to close in on her, the room shrinking with her every heartbeat.
She raced to the door, her hand reaching for the lock, but it wouldn't budge. The door was stuck. Panic surged through her veins as she rattled the handle. Rattling the handle in desperation, she pulled and pushed, but it wouldn't give. The door seemed to mock her futile attempts. Turning back, she scanned the room, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Every corner seemed to hide a threat, every shadow a potential danger. He was here somewhere, lurking in the darkness, waiting. She could feel his eyes on her, watching her every move.
The lights flickered, plunging the room into momentary darkness. Her heart pounded in her chest, the silence deafening. When they flickered back on, he was closer. The distance between them had shrunk, his presence more menacing than ever. Standing in the middle of the room, his skeletal fingers reaching towards her. She could see the malevolence in his eyes, the intent to harm clear as day. Her mind raced, searching for an escape, but there was none. She was trapped with no way out. Emily screamed, a primal cry of fear that echoed through the entire apartment.
She stumbled back, her eyes fixed on the horrifying figure standing before her.
And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was completely gone. The room was empty. Silence descended, heavy and oppressive. Emily stood frozen, her body trembling, her breath caught in her throat. Had it been a hallucination, a nightmare brought on by stress and fear? A soft scratching sound coming from the closet door provided a chilling answer. He was still here. The next morning, the sun streamed through the windows, chasing away the shadows of the night. But the light brought little comfort to Mrs. Peterson, who lived in the apartment below Emily. She hadn't seen Emily all morning. Odd. Emily was always up early, greeting the day with a cheerful smile. Mrs. Peterson decided to check on her young neighbour.
Knocking gently on Emily's door, she called out, "Emily, dear, are you all right?"
Silence. Only silence met her ears. Growing sense of unease filled Mrs. Peterson. She tried the doorknob. To her surprise, it turned. The door swung open. The apartment was empty. No Emily, no sign of a struggle, just an eerie stillness that sent chills down Mrs. Peterson's spine. On the floor, lying open, lay Emily's journal. Mrs. Peterson picked it up, her hands trembling. A single sentence, scrawled in hurried handwriting, caught her eye. "He's real. The Shadow Man is real."
A cold breeze swept through the open window, rustling the curtains. Mrs. Peterson shivered. A sudden shadow fell across the room. Looking up, she saw a figure standing in the doorway. Tall, thin, eyes glowing with a sinister red light. The shadow man had found a new target.